Hey everybody, Matt Johnston. I'm back with another COVID-19 legal update. So this particular video is a follow-on from the very last video where I started talking about the Department of Labor's regulation on the FFCRA, the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, particularly as it applied to federal paid sick leave and the expanded FMLA. So this particular video, we're going to start talking a little bit about documentation. So I want to, again, we're going to get a little bit more technical in here. There's some important information in here, but I just want to make sure that everybody understands that this is not confidential or privileged legal advice. I'm a lawyer, but I am not your lawyer. So keep that in mind. Well, some of you may be my clients, and if you are, you should really schedule a time so that we can talk about this, how it applies to you and your business. For those of you who are not clients, we are offering, as of today, we're offering a pay what you can consultation so that you can get some answers without having to worry about necessarily seeing a big bill. While I would appreciate some financial payment, I'd much rather have a big balance of good karma on my balance sheet, and we'll see what happens as we go forward. I'm more interested in making sure that small businesses can continue to operate and move forward in the world rather than get shut down and shut out because of the public health emergency that we are facing. So if you want to have a consultation with us, there's a scheduling link down below where you can give us a call, or you can set up either a Zoom call or a phone call, or I'll even do Skype or something along those lines, and we will have a chat, and I'm happy to do that. In the meantime, let's talk about documentation. At the end of, oh, by the way, before I start, I may be looking in funny places instead of at the camera, and that's because I'm reading stuff. So let's get started. So in the last session, I was talking about documentation, and I started talking about small business exemptions. Under the FFCRA, the Secretary of Labor may exempt certain small businesses from having to comply and to pay the paid sick leave or the expanded FMLA for 3 reasons. So an employer, a small employer with 50 or fewer employees, can deny an employee paid sick leave or expanded FMLA if, 1, such leave would cause the employer's financial obligations to the employees, the paying of the sick leave, exceeds their revenue, and their revenue as it stands now, and would cause the small employer to stop operating even at a minimal capacity. Reason number 2 would be the employee's absence would put a substantial risk to the business, either the financial health of the business or the operational capacity, because of that employee's specialized skill or knowledge of the business, something like that. The third reason is that if the small employer cannot find enough other workers who are able, willing, qualified, and available at the time and place needed for the employer to operate. So for those 3 reasons, the employer can deny paid sick leave or expanded FMLA if the employee was otherwise eligible. Okay, so what do employers do in that situation? Well, you're going to have some documentation, okay? And as I often tell employers, when you're dealing with employees and employee relationships, document, and when you're done with that, document a little bit more. So what are some of the things that you are going to have to document? Well, 1, you're certainly going to have to document your revenue. So you're going to need a good sharp eye on what your revenue is week by week, okay? It's not specific that it says week by week, but because employees are paid based upon a work week, you're going to want to be able to track that information on a week-by-week basis and be able to demonstrate that if I had to pay these employees for their sick leave, paid sick leave, or even their expanded FMLA at 2/3 of their pay, or it would you know, if I don't have the revenue to pay that, then I shouldn't have to pay it. And so you're going to have to demonstrate that revenue. So if you're tracking your information in accounting software, you're going to be fine. So, you know, maintain those sorts of ideas and information. If you're going to be looking at something from a viewpoint of this particular employee is very specialized, or they know so much about the business that their absence would create a risk that the operation would be able to continue even at a minimal capacity, you're going to have some sort of explanation about what is that employee's job, why that employee is so specialized, or why you don't have other people who are cross-trained. So I guess sort of the ludicrous definition that I came up with, that if you're a logistics, if you're a truck driving company and things like that, and you only have 2 drivers to deliver your goods, allowing one of those drivers to take a paid sick leave time or an expanded FMLA would probably render you largely incapable of being able to work, even in the presence of the current federal rules that have sort of exempted or at least eased some of the Department of Transportation's rules on truck driver time behind the wheel. So it's not the greatest example, I admit, but it's the best one I can come up with on the fly. If you don't have other employees who are qualified, willing and able to come in and available, then you're going to have to be able to document what that looks like. So you're going to have to be able to show some things like, here are all of my employees that are available, okay, and I need this particular employee to be working because in order for these other 5 employees to work, this one employee needs to be working, and there's nobody else who can take that. So you're going to be looking at things like job descriptions, you're going to be looking at roles and responsibilities, you're going to be looking at a table of organization or something like that, and you're going to have all of these records in place. So if you don't have great job descriptions, you're going to have a difficult time documenting that. Now, you don't have to send any of this information to the Department of Labor, but you do have to maintain those records for 4 years. So keep that in mind. So even after this emergency is gone, you've got to keep those records in place for 4 years. You may also need those records in order to substantiate your request for the tax credits that are available from the Internal Revenue Service. So keep those things in mind. So what about other documentation that comes up? So the FFCRA did amend some information related to the Family Medical Leave Act, and the FMLA has some pretty specific documentation requirements in order to grant the leave under traditional or classic FMLA. Under eFMLA, some of the documentation requirements are eased. For example, an employer doesn't have to provide notices or rights and responsibility documents, but you do have to document the requests for leave. So if an employee comes to you and says, well, I have a family member, my wife has been diagnosed with COVID-19, probably not a good idea for that person to be coming into work anyway, and no work and they're not able to telework because of the nature of the work that they do, but work is available, then you can grant the sick leave as required under the FFCRA, and you're going to want to have some documentation that's collecting that information. So some of that documentation can be simple. This is the leave that I'm requesting. This is what I would like to have. This is how long I think I'm going to need it. This is the reason why. And keep that kind of information in your records and things like that. The IRS has issued some guidance, not regulations, but guidance on what employers need to obtain in terms of documentation. If there is a requirement from a healthcare provider, you should be trying to the extent possible to get that recommendation in writing. Now look, our healthcare workers are massively overworked right now, and such documentation may be a little slow in coming. So you may only have an oral report from your employee that says, oh, hey, my doctor says I really should self-quarantine because I'm particularly at risk. Now, here's the interesting thing. You have to be very careful with the kinds of questions that you are asking about that risk. Now, if they are saying, I'm at risk, I have, a lung condition, or I have, I've been treated for cancer a couple of times, or I'm otherwise immunocompromised, then that any information that you as an employer receive related to somebody's healthcare condition must be maintained confidentially. It cannot be shared with anybody. So if somebody says, hey, where's Bob? Why isn't he in? You can simply say he's on sick leave. You cannot say why he's on sick leave. So keep that in mind. Please, please, please keep it confidential. You may have to be getting some of your documentation in an oral situation, and if that's the case, take contemporaneous notes, date timestamp your notes to the best you can. If you can have your employee confirm things by email, that's great. Any sort of additional documentation until you can get official records from your employee about the self-diagnosis or the self-isolation rules or a recommendation from their healthcare providers. So manage that information and collect all that information. You still have to maintain it for 4 years. So if you need help figuring out what is necessary, please give us a call. For employers who have 50 or more employees, you're already, for the most part, FMLA eligible, or you're required to provide FMLA, so you already should have that information in place. If you are a smaller employer who's been exempt from FMLA, then you probably don't have this information in place and a way to collect it. That's another reason to give us a call. We'll walk through what you need to collect, how you need to collect it, the kinds of forms that are necessary, the kinds of information that you need to be collecting on those forms. In the meantime, we're going to be doing a few more of these videos related to the Department of Labor's regulations. Next up, we're going to talk about pay and how much has to be paid and the eligibility of employees and how the paid sick leave and the EFMLA works together with an employer's already existing paid time off policies or even state level paid time off policies. In the meantime, keep washing your hands, practice a little social distancing, keep your head up. We're going to get through this, I promise you. In the meantime, I'll talk to y'all later. Bye-bye.